meets with the prime minister at the prime minister's country estate in Chequers. And a lot of this is to really solidify and strengthen that relationship between these two countries at a time when Trump has shown little interest in keeping with the post-World War II order. And so that's what a lot of this is about. One striking moment, though, that I do want to bring up, Brianna and Boris, is that we have seen the president and King Charles have a lot of moments, one-on-one private conversations, very kind of different from what we saw back from his state visit in 2019. Of course, those tend to be private. We likely won't get any information on what they actually discuss, but we know they have very different politics, and King Charles especially wanting more aid for Ukraine to fight Russia's aggression. Climate change, another big priorities of his. So he could potentially have brought those up or bring those up later today. All of that we are watching very keenly.
And Max, you have covered many of these visits. Talk to us about this one and how it compares in scale and significance.
It was supersize on every level. Wherever they could make it bigger, they made it bigger. The Guard of Honor, usually one company, three companies, so 3 times as many soldiers as they could fit into that little square there. They just rammed as many as they could in to give, I think, Charles things to point to for the president to say this has never been done before in the history of this 1,000-year-old castle. The beating retreat, which Elena was talking about there, has never been done for a state visit. It's normally reserved for the King's birthday up in London. So there's so much to point to say this is an unprecedented second state visit, but also in terms of scale, this is the biggest event we could possibly lay on for you. And we're about to see the state banquet. I think it's going to be extraordinary on a different level, really, in many ways. And woven into it will be as many elements, not just of American life woven into it, in terms of the drinks and the food and the music, but also specifically Donald Trump. I think there'll be tributes to him, his mother, to Melania, everywhere, so they can keep pointing things out, saying this is the most special visit you could possibly have got.
And talk to us, Max, about the protests that I mentioned.
Well, the protests are there. They're quite obvious in London, but the protests can't get anywhere near Donald Trump. He's been flown into protected safe zones in a helicopter. I think the most extraordinary moment really early in the day was the procession. So you have a carriage procession with the cavalry out front. Normally it's going through crowds of people, and that's part of the moment. But this was in Windsor Great Park with no public allowed anywhere near it. Yes, there's a big security concern here, but other presidents have been in front of the public in the carriages before. I think a lot of this was on the British side, actually, trying to protect the president from any sort of embarrassment, to make sure he felt really, really special, and that the relationship with America was kept intact in long term. And despite the fact that so many members of the public have a complete distaste, frankly.
It's here, Gabe Gutierrez, thank you so much for reporting there from Buckingham Palace. And I want to bring in now NBC's Raf Sanchez in London. And Raf, as we mentioned, the location of this visit is at Windsor Castle, keeping Trump far away from scenes like the one where you are. Just describe what you're seeing, what you're hearing.
Yeah, Ariel. So President Trump at Windsor Castle, about 20 miles that way, doing the pomp, doing the pageantry. Here in central London, we've seen very large protests over the course of the day. The crowds are starting to thin out a little bit, but earlier we saw this just enormous march through the center of the city. They're now in front of the British Parliament. That, of course, is Big Ben up there. And people are out here for a diverse range of reasons. The group that put this protest together is called the Stop Trump Coalition. We've heard from people who are angry about the president's policy on Gaza, his policy on Ukraine, his approach to the environment. But the unifying message bringing all of these people out is that President Trump is not welcome in Britain. Now, what we have heard from people is that they understand the British government doesn't have a choice but to deal with the president of the United States, the world's most powerful person. But what they really, really object to is what they see as this kind of unnecessary rolling out of the red carpet for some somebody who they say, you know, is in conflict with many of the key values in this country. It's also been notable, Ariel, just how many people have been holding signs to do with Jeffrey Epstein. If the president thought that he was leaving the Epstein scandal behind in Washington, D.C., he really had another thing coming, as you mentioned. Large images of the president with the convicted sex offender from decades ago were projected onto the walls of Windsor Castle yesterday, and we've seen a lot of demonstrators here today holding signs related to Epstein. The British ambassador in Washington was actually fired last week after it emerged that he not only signs that birthday book, which the president is alleged to have signed, he denies having anything to do with it, but also had very extensive email correspondence with Jeffrey Epstein even after his first conviction for sexual offenses. So the Epstein scandal continuing to roil things on this side of the Atlantic also. The president, of course, not seeing this because his schedule is designed to keep him largely outside of London. But as on his first state visit back in 2019, we have been seeing large protests here in London at President Trump's arrival. Ariel.
He may not be seeing it now, Raph, but we do know the president watches TV, and assuredly he will see them at some point. Thank you so much for your reporting. And Tim, King Charles is known for being a bit more outspoken than his mother, the Queen. How in the history of the monarchy have they played a role in shaping policy with foreign leaders? Specifically, we know that they had hosted President Trump during the Brexit situation. How is Prince Charles potentially going to, or King Charles, I should say at this point, going to shape Trump's thoughts when it comes to foreign policy, or trying to?
I don't think the king would expect to be able to shape the president's thoughts. What he can do is to present to the president what the government thinks is the most tempting face of Britain, if you like, all the pageantry that we've been talking about. I mean, Charles.
President Trump's historic second state visit to the UK has been marked by next-level pomp and circumstance inside the walls of Windsor Castle and royal fury outside of those walls. The president and the First Lady are expected to arrive soon at St. George's Hall for a state banquet to cap off a full day of events, including the UK's largest military ceremony for a foreign leader in living memory. And yet, for all the honor inside those walls, outside there was a crush of protest, including images intended to provoke. 4 people were arrested for projecting a stinging 9-minute video montage onto the walls of Windsor Tower, laying out a timeline of allegations tying Donald Trump to pedophile Jeffrey Epstein.
1997. Trump and Epstein are seen together at 2 Victoria's Secret parties and are photographed together at Mar-a-Lago. The same year, Trump gifts a book to Epstein with the dedication, "To Jeff, you are the greatest, Donald."
Joining us now, President Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations and author of the weekly Substack newsletter, Home and Away, Richard Haass, and Vanity Fair columnist and former managing editor of the Sunday Times in London, Clive Irving. Clive, it is your country. Tell me what it is like there right now, because, boy, is there a difference between what is inside the castle walls and what is happening outside.
Yeah, it's crossed the line in a sense for many people in Britain that the royal family has been used in this way. I think meeting the needs of a vainglorious president has been successful today. I think they've laid everything on and reflected glory, all the pomp and circumstance, the military connections, the fly past, all of that can be judged as success. But the agonizing question for many Brits is it worth it? Now, the government argues we had to keep on the right side of President Trump. And by doing so, from the start, by promising this state visit, we've done better than almost any other country in preserving the damage that could be done by tariffs, also much beyond tariffs, building up or keeping safe and secure the essential security and intelligence interaction and interdependence of the 2 countries. Never mind the thing about special relationship. I mean, I think that's a kind of very tired thing. It's a very practical, almost you could say pragmatic and cynical decision. that at all costs, both countries need to be close together and have to prevent Trump from making that situation unpredictable. And so I think at the end of this day, they've succeeded in that, but at a tremendous cost. And for me, as an observer of the royal family, I must say I have very almost emetic feelings about what I've seen today, in that such a whole roll-up of, if you like, Rule Britannia and all its apparatus devoted solely to a person who has not respected so many things about the core values of Great Britain.
Interestingly, Richard, you are seeing those protests outside of the walls again in London. But over the weekend, there was also a really large protest, and it was bigger than this, an anti-immigration protest, a pro-Britain protest, you could call it, I guess, arguably, a nationalist protest. People were wearing Trump hats and holding Trump signs in that protest. Donald Trump might not be the majority, but Donald Trump has inspired something there and inspired something certainly across Europe since his rise that has only been elevated since he was able to regain the White House.
No, absolutely, Katie. What we're seeing is versions of Trumpism, essentially populism, a kind of radicalism, anti-status quo, tends to be anti-immigrant in many cases. We're seeing it in Britain, we're seeing it in France, Germany, and so forth. So sure, I mean, in some ways modeled on his success here. My hunch is we're going to see more of it.
You can see that people in the UK do not like Trump. They can gussy it up, but his whole narrative has been shut down. Because remember, the events aren't even necessarily just, he's having dinner with the king and and the queen and all the bigwigs, the royals, the nobles. The event is that he's going there to hide from scandals, especially on the home front. And that's not, it's not just Jeffrey and Ghislaine and all that, but it is that. And he was going out of the country in this idea that I'll go hide and people won't know who I am or care who I am as much. And I could sort of just fly under the radar. Not realizing that, one, he is Donald Trump. He's world famous, right? People know who he is everywhere. And then also, people don't like him in the UK. And specifically, they don't like him right now because of the tariffs and all of that. But especially, the Epstein story is an international story. It's not just American. I need to make that very clear to folks. But if there's, but the UK is especially embroiled in it. As you heard they fired public servants based on their connections to Epstein, connections that are very similar to the connections Trump likely has. And then also, like a member of the royal family, one of the Queen Elizabeth, the former Queen's sons, has been at least broadly implicated in this civilly. You know what I mean? There's a whole thing where one of the sons, he's been semi-blacklisted for what he may or may not have done with regards to his friendship with Epstein and the young girls and all of that, right? We know what I'm talking about. And all of that means that everyone in the UK is on edge because of this. Donald's created the situation where, other than the United States, there's probably no worse place to go in the world to hide from this particular scandal than where he is right now. And so, Donald, this isn't going away. We're going to talk about a lot of the other stuff you're doing. The censorship and all of that. But you will not distract people. This story is just beginning.